Yeah, hi, it's Craig here. What we're going to talk about today, I don't actually know because I haven't decided. Let's talk about the new internet. Right, what do I mean by the new internet? Well, the traditional internet, the one that's been around for the last, well, widely used by the public in the last 25 years, 30 years, relies on primarily subsea undersea cables. Now, these cables run between continents under the sea and they connect the internet up. There has been some problems in recent years with sabotage or even ship's anchors breaking the cables and therefore slowing down, but not totally killing the internet generally. They won't generally kill it if there's more than one way that the packets of data can travel to their destination. Obviously, if you're on some remote island with one cable going there, that could be an issue. But that is the way most of the internet works. Now, increasingly, we're using low Earth orbit satellites, and you've heard various tech leaders talking about putting data centers in the sky. What they're doing is using all levels of orbits. They're using low Earth orbit and they're using medium Earth orbit they're planning to put the servers in. Now, this, if you think about it, is what you'd call in telecommunications as redundancy. It's a backup system, like in the same way that a building might have, or a system might have a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. So if the mains electricity goes off, a battery backup kicks in. Or if it was a hospital, they'll have a generator system, diesel powered generator that could kick in. This new using the internet via low Earth orbit satellites connected together via laser links, optical links, is creating a second tier of the internet, which could potentially be totally independent of the ground-based systems, if you think about it, which is useful for like emergency services, for instance. So, I mean, if you take Germany, a couple of years ago, whenever it was, they had bad flooding and a number of the cell sites, these metal towers of antennas that you see around that are providing mobile internet, they became useless because they became flooded. Same with earthquakes. Terrestrial, i.e. equipment on the Earth, can become... An earthquake could take out some of the equipment, could break the cables. As I said, the undersea cables connecting the internet could be at risk of sabotage. They could be at risk of ship's anchors, all sorts of things. Political tensions, they might just disconnect them. Now, having connections via satellite isn't 100% reliable either, because satellites can be attacked, they can be jammed. It's not a fail-safe system either, but it is a type of redundancy, a type of backup to the terrestrial systems. And if worst case scenario, it is an alternative internet, an alternative system to the one on Earth that's relying on all this fiber optic cable infrastructure. So it's interesting. I mean, Starlink, for instance, covering the Earth, low Earth orbit satellites. You don't have to, you can just point your satellite terminal unit up from where your location is and communicate. You could be in the middle of nowhere and it works. And one of the developments of low Earth orbit satellites is direct to device or direct to cell, whereby, that's all that's going to be out here, right? whereby standard mobile phones communicate directly with low Earth orbit satellites. So you don't even need a terminal unit. You just get connectivity straight away. Now, due to issues such as the small antennas in smartphones and well, mainly that, there is a limit at the moment of the data rate, how quick you can, how much data you can effectively download using direct to device. So you're not going to be streaming 4K videos over it at the moment, but technology is developing all the time. Maybe we'll be able to in the future. I mean, but direct to device useful for emergency contacts. You know, sort of. It has been proven to work as a broadband connection, but not a very quick broadband connection at the moment. So you can certainly send messages across it and calls, and they have done video as well. So it's a developing area. It's going to be big. So direct to device, that is another way that satellites have been used to provide internet. There's also satellite internet comes under what's called NTN, non-terrestrial networks. Now, another type of non-terrestrial network is HAPS, HAPS, high altitude platforms. Now, these could be in the form of gliders, air balloons. Basically, they're at high altitude. They're not on the ground, so non-terrestrial. So they're in the sky, in the high atmosphere. Now, this differs from low Earth orbit satellites, because whereas a HAP might be 20 kilometers up, a low Earth orbit satellite is going to be somewhere between, I don't know, a couple hundred and a couple thousand kilometers from the Earth's surface. Now, this matters because of a thing called latency. Latency is the time it takes for the radio signal to get from the satellite or the high altitude platform, basically the transmitter, to the receiver. And if you think about satellites, you're transmitting, that's possibly a signal up from a ground station, if it was a two-way communication, up to the satellite and beaming it back down again. So there's a latency for the signal to go up, and then a latency as it beams it back down again. That is what latency is. It's the time that it takes for the signal to get from the transmitter to the receiver. Now, HAPS, high altitude platforms, as I said, are 20 kilometers typically from the Earth's surface, rather than up to 2,000 kilometers for low Earth orbit satellites, or geosynchronous satellites, which are the older technology, the sort of things you might be using for satellite television. But they also do use it for internet. They are at 36,000 kilometers from the Earth, and that introduces higher latency, such as 500 milliseconds. Now, that results in delays in transmission. So you may have seen when they're using it for live broadcasts between continents, and there's a news report and they ask a question, there's a few second delay. Well, the reporter just stands there waiting for the message from the newsroom to reach him or her so they can reply back. Now, that is latency. They're not just waiting there because they feel like having a dramatic pause between hearing the question and speaking. They're actually waiting for the message to come through. So obviously, high altitude platforms, we've said up around 20 kilometers from the Earth, are going to have even lower latency than low Earth orbit satellites. So high altitude platforms also have a role in expanding the internet to unconnected areas. Remember, or haven't mentioned it in this video, but there are currently, according to the ITU, an estimated 2.2 billion people worldwide which don't have connectivity. 2.2 billion, not quite a third of the world population, and it has come down from 2.6 billion, but it's still a lot. It was 2.6 billion in 2023 when I did my TEDx talk. It's now 2.2 billion estimated. So that's progress, but it's still a massive amount of people without connectivity. Maybe they can't afford connectivity. Or maybe they live in a region where it's so remote that connectivity using terrestrial systems is not viable on economic grounds. So that's where satellite can come in, especially LEO. As I said, non-terrestrial networks can include satellites and HAPS, high altitude platforms. So both are defined as non-terrestrial networks. The advantages of HAPS is they're closer to the Earth and less latency. We'll go into it another time, a bit more technical detail about the differences, but what's happening now is companies are starting to develop multi-level orbit solutions. So what this means is you're not using one orbit. For instance, you're not using just low Earth orbit or medium Earth orbit or geosynchronous orbit, or indeed HAPS, which are high altitude platforms, as we said. They're using a combination of them to provide effective connectivity. So this is some of the exciting things that are happening in telecommunications, in wireless communications in 2026. I'm Craig. I hope this has been useful. If you'd like some tailored advice, I work through a consultancy company called it's called something else. It hasn't rebranded yet, so it's called Yes Way Communications at the moment. And we can provide tailored advice on both terrestrial and satellite communications, provide training both for individual learners and for sort of business leaders wanting to get an overview of the technologies and how they could benefit from them. Okay, thanks for watching my video. I haven't made one for a while because I've been doing a lot of teaching over the last year and haven't really had the time, to be honest with you. There's only so many things you can do in 24 hours, but hopefully I'm going to make some more now. Okay, thanks for watching my video. Have a good day. Bye.